When we look at the conflict, especially, it's almost anticipated that every couple of years when there are wage negotiations, you almost go into strike season because of the tension and the conflict. Given how anticipated it is, why does it always come to that deadlock that we see year to year?
I think it's partly to do with the nature of our labour relations act and the way the parties approach the process. Often the parties are already polarised in terms of their demands. You often see a union coming in with a demand in the double digits and an employer coming in with a demand an offer fairly low. And they just can't seem to find each other to begin with. And they only really get to have a proper negotiation once a strike commences. It has almost become part of our DNA. And our system, in terms of the Labour Relations Act, is predicated on that basis, that you go to the CCMA for conciliation. If you can't conciliate the matter, then you have 30 days in which to do it, and then the party can issue a strike, and then you go out on strike. And unless you ask the CCMA to continue to attempt to mediate the dispute for you, there is no one who you're obliged to go and mediate with. Point to be made is that the 2015 amendments to the Labour Relations Act in terms of strikes attempted to address some of these issues, and the current debate in front of Nedlac about further amendments to the Labour Relations Act also seek to address these issues. In part a question of how do you deal with violence in the strikes, because it seems that that is a further aspect that continually our strikes are marred with a significant amount of violence, and can you take action against those people? And then there's also a debate, do we follow perhaps a model like the Canadians in certain sectors of society where you're allowed to strike for a period of time? If it cannot resolve itself, do you go to a compulsory form of arbitration?
Yeah, but surely the strike is in itself a symptom of the problematic nature of the system. So is there any way that we can have a conversation around how the system itself perhaps is not the best way to approach how wage negotiations should be taking place? Because we see this year on year, and we have it, and unless there's a fundamental change with how things are done, we will continue to see it.
I'm not sure that the system is necessarily the problem. I think it may be more the players in the system.
Sure.
There is no reason in law why I cannot continue to consult with an employer as a trade union without taking my members out on strike. My members can continue to work and I can continue to negotiate. But there seems to be an underlying premise that no one will listen to me unless I go out on
But often also that becomes the case, because with some employers you will find that when the unions are making their demands in the beginning, they'll start the offer on a very low base, and eventually they settle. If the demand is 15 or 20%, they'll settle on 7, 8, maybe 9%. So given that both parties almost expect and anticipate what the end point might be, at least the margins of the end point, why can't we get there in the first place?
That is a question. I mentioned that at the beginning. Yeah. That's a point that I don't understand. The unions approach negotiations with unrealistic demands. Employers approach negotiations with unrealistic offers. One questions, why do we not? We know we're going to settle somewhere between 6 and 8% as a general median. Why don't we begin the consultation there? And if we did that, would that not gender greater trust in the parties? Would the parties not come to the table with a greater expectation that a genuine effort will be made to resolve it? If I take you back to the Canadian model, in certain of their industries, for example, the building industry, where they have a very limited period of time in which to build because of the heavy winters, they're allowed to strike for a very limited period. And if they can't resolve the strike within that period, then they have to go to compulsory arbitration. Now, you take your risk if you give the right to a third party to decide your fate for you. So the parties then, in that limited period of time, consult much more aggressively in terms of trying to find each other and trying to find a solution. It might be that a similar approach here may be appropriate.
Do you think that the mediation organizations like the CCMA and even Nedlac as a space for debate and policy making, that they're sufficient in, number one, ending the deadlock and in ensuring that there is this mutual between the parties on whose behalf they have to negotiate?
I think that there are a number of questions around Nedlac that were asked in relation to the minimum wage debates, and there was a feeling that perhaps 3-4 years ago Nedlac didn't have the senior players from employers, from the employer side or from the union side coming. I think that has changed again. I think the discussions at the moment are held at the correct level. I think the CCMA does a fantastic job in trying to mediate strikes. I think their success rate is very good. It's just not always easy to get them in, and then to bring the parties to the point where they find each other. We have a tremendous legacy in South Africa in relation to labour relations and interactions between trade unions and employers that I think are a stumbling block for many consultations that could perhaps, or negotiations that could perhaps be resolved more easily. The Eskom example is a very difficult one. I think employees are confronted with, do I take no increase? If I force an increase, do I run the risk of being retrenched in 2 or 3 months' time? One's not certain what the future is. Now, those negotiations are very emotional at the same time, and it takes very strong characters to be able to guide you through that.
Certainly, many employees finding themselves caught between a rock and a hard place, given that even on the days that they're striking, they're losing income for that position.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The maths of it, if you strike for 2 weeks, sure, the increase you've gained, you will never get back in economic terms, because you've lost income for 2 weeks. Whatever increase you get, you will perhaps only break even in a year or two time.
All right.
It comes with a significant pressure on employees.
Thanks for